Chosen one, begin where pull is born. At the still center no crowd can counterfeit. There is a hush there that does not silence the world. It simply organizes it. When you keep company with this hush, your presence stops trying to persuade and starts to permit. People do not feel dragged toward you. They remember how to stand near you. That remembering is your first magnetism. It begins with breath long enough to be believed and posture honest enough to carry weight without complaint. It is not a performance. It is a covenant with steadiness, renewed in small, unseen rooms before any doors open and names are called. Quiet gravity never announces itself because it never auditions. It keeps time at a human tempo. It allows a conversation to finish becoming a thought before it is asked to become a conclusion. It lets the longest sentence in the room belong to the one who needed it most. You have learned the delicacy of this pacing the way a shoreline learns the habits of its tide. Some moments want the water right up to the grasses. Some want a wide sky of sand. You do not bully the water into drama or starve the land into desolation. You allow proportion to become atmosphere, and atmosphere to become relief. Relief, felt before it is named, is the first sign that your field is working. What others call charisma, you have learned to call coherence. You carry your values like internal architecture, not external signage. Patience framed into the doorways, truth set into the load-bearing beams, humor running the length of the windows to invite in more light. This interior alignment does something that techniques cannot. It lowers the cost of being present with you. People's shoulders approach their natural height again. Their breath stops negotiating for permission. Their words begin to choose accuracy over impressiveness. You did not pull any of this from them. You simply made the room safe enough for it to arrive. Your gravity shows up in small mercies. The glass of water handed before the voice cracks. The chair angled so a shy person has an exit and an option. The name spoken correctly the first time and the second. The phone turned face down without theater. These are not habits of politeness. They are acts of engineering. They reduce friction. They return momentum to what matters. Around you, effort stops being exhausted by needless obstacles and becomes energy for real work. People call this ease, but it is not laziness. It is design. The chosen ones know the difference and practice it daily, preferring invisible craft to visible spectacle. Quiet gravity keeps faith with silence. You do not treat silence as a vacancy to be filled, but as a chamber to be honored. In such chambers, the unhurried truth has time to walk in on its own feet. You have learned to protect that threshold. If a story arrives with hands shaking, you warm the hands rather than rush the ending. If laughter tries to trample a tender confession, you guide it aside without scolding it for being alive. If anger knocks because love has been mistreated, you offer it a chair and a glass of water before asking it to choose its words. In these ways, your presence persuades without pressure, and the world near you remembers that courage does not have to shout to be heard. The magnetism you carry is not hunger, it is hospitality. Hunger grabs, hospitality gathers. When people draw closer, they do not feel consumed, they feel returned to themselves. You give attention that nourishes and keeps its hands clean. You look to understand rather than to inventory. You listen until names discover their proper spelling inside someone's chest. You ask questions that provide oxygen instead of extracting certainty. You bless the incomplete thought with patience and the trembling voice with a pace it can trust. Slowly, without speech about it, the room tilts toward wholeness. No one can explain why. They do not need to. The field is doing its work. You also carry boundaries that do not bruise. Gravity sets orbits, it does not chain. You can be near without being swallowed, available without being annexed. When you say no, the door remains unbroken, and the threshold still knows your footsteps. When you say yes, it is a promise scaled to truth, rather than alone against fatigue. This integrity of distance and devotion keeps the field clean. It is why people who are used to magnetism that taxes them find your company strangely restorative. They leave with more of themselves than they arrived with, and they remember that nearness can be nourishment, not negotiation. The quiet of your gravity has been apprenticed to joy that does not borrow. There is a brightness in you that owes nothing to approval and everything to gratitude. Because it is not rented, it does not charge others for its return. This brightness slips into rooms like sunrise into kitchens. Work beginning, hearts softening, simple food becoming sacrament. You do not have to declare it. It touches cups and conversations and calendars until the day tastes different. People later call you magnetic. What happened was gentler and more difficult. You remained yourself until others felt safe to remain themselves too. Quiet gravity ends as it begins, with the smallest faithfulness. You straighten what the day has tilted. You send the message that lets someone else sleep. You keep the appointment with your own soul so that tomorrow's field can still be trusted. And when you step away, the space does not collapse, it continues. Continuation is the secret measure of true magnetism. It does not make dependence. It makes rooms that remember how to be alive. Chosen one, magnetism without integrity is only a parlor trick, impressive for a moment, expensive by the hour. Integrity turns attraction into atmosphere, attention into alignment, interest into endurance. It is the invisible geometry by which your presence bends a room toward honesty without raising its voice. You did not acquire this field by collecting techniques. You built it with the ordinary courage of keeping your word when it was small, of telling the truth before it needed an audience, of repairing what you broke without hiring applause to witness it. Over time, those choices learned to agree with one another. Agreement became resonance. Resonance became pull. Integrity's field begins with a simple arithmetic. You refuse to spend tomorrow to look generous today. You pay your debts with punctuality and your compliments with evidence. Your yes is earned and therefore trustworthy. Your no is humane and therefore survivable. People who live in the weather of your decisions learn the forecast quickly. Promises kept, boundaries honored, credit shared, harm named, repair begun. That forecast is not exciting, it is safe. Safety is the soil from which the rarest flowers grow. Laughter that doesn't apologize, ideas that don't hide, affection that doesn't bargain. Your word has weight because your actions carry its same metal. If you say you will be there, you arrive with your whole attention, not your body on layaway while your mind shops for elsewhere. If you say you will find out, you separate rumor from fact and return with the difference. If you say you don't know, you make ignorance a trailhead instead of a pose. This congruence is not dramatic, which is why it is magnetic. People lean toward what they can lean on. In a culture trained to brace for disappointment, reliability feels like power. It is. Integrity bends more than calendars. It shapes tone. You have learned to speak truth at a temperature others can hold. You have learned to correct without collapsing dignity, to praise without creating debt, to decline without leaving a bruise, to apologize without turning remorse into theater. Because you handle words like instruments of healing rather than weapons of winning, rooms that were braced for performance become places where precision and kindness can coexist. The field grows stronger each time you choose accuracy over arrogance and mercy over efficiency. The result is not softness, it is strength that refuses to be brittle. Repair is your second gravity. You do not confuse perfection with trustworthiness. Trust grows best in the soil of prompt, specific repair. When you wound, you name the wound before the wounded do your homework for you. You ask what restoration requires, and you do that without discount codes for your intent. You let consequences teach without recruiting shame to do the teaching. You check back after the apology to see if the floor still creaks. This willingness to fix, not perform fixing, thickens the air around you. People are drawn to climates where harm does not have to become history to be accounted for, and where history is allowed to become wisdom rather than identity. Integrity governs your appetites without shaming them. Desire, when disciplined by devotion, becomes fuel rather than fire hazard. You eat for life, not for evidence. You rest for readiness, not for excuses. You work for meaning, not for manipulation. You touch with consent, tenderness, and proportion. You let admiration become blessing before it becomes pursuit. Because you answer to a standard larger than mood, those near you stop being drafted into the exhausting job of managing your weather. This liberation is quiet and immense. It is why the phrase, "most magnetic man," can be spoken about you without anyone needing to recover afterward. Money and time tell the same story your mouth tells. You spend in ways that keep tomorrow possible. You tip in ways that confess gratitude. rather than purchase image. You save in ways that honor future you and the strangers you will one day be able to help. You budget attention, reserving the best of it for people rather than screens, for craft rather than performance, for service rather than spectacle. Where your ledger matches your liturgy, the field stabilizes. People who have learned to doubt declarations begin to trust patterns. Patterns are more persuasive than speeches. Privacy in your care is stewardship, not leverage. Secrets handed to you do not become currency you trade when conflict tempts you to win at any cost. Photos entrusted to you do not become trophies for lonely nights. Stories given to you in tears are not poured back as proof when you need to be right. You guard people in their absence, even when anger would make betrayal feel briefly efficient. This quiet faithfulness turns rumor away at your door and invites reverence to sit down. Reverence alters gravity. It teaches hearts that they can show their unedited selves and still be held. Integrity lets your face, your tone, and your choices share one address. You do not develop a dialect of cruelty to be fluent in certain rooms and then attempt to trade it back for tenderness in others. You do not preach generosity at breakfast and hoard credit at lunch. You do not build public prayers and private vendettas. Continuity becomes the field's strongest line of force. People stop needing to translate you. Translation is expensive. When it is no longer required, energy once spent on vigilance is released for belonging, creativity, and joy. You practice boundaries as acts of love. You will not be everywhere, know everything, or answer everyone. Your no protects the worth of your yes, and your rest protects the beauty of your work. Because you decline what would dilute your soul, you become more available to what would deepen it. This selectivity is not arrogance, it is accuracy about calling. Others feel its rightness like a tune that finally resolves. They do not resent your limits, they relax into their own. The field you carry changes architecture. Meetings end earlier because clarity has replaced theater. Apologies shrink because harm is prevented upstream. Celebrations feel cleaner because credit is distributed like sunlight rather than currency. People begin to plan by your weather, not your whim. They bring their best work and their honest hearts because they expect both to be held with care. Lovers, friends, and strangers alike leave your orbit more themselves than when they entered. This is the only test that matters for magnetism. Does nearness create dependency or dignity? Integrity chooses dignity every time. Walk on, chosen one, with this unremarkable splendor, the steady alignment of word and deed, aim and appetite, truth and tenderness. Keep the lamp trimmed in private so the beam can be trusted in public. Keep the hearth tended so warmth can travel farther than your mood. Keep the small covenants so the large ones rest on something more substantial than wish. The chosen ones will know you by this field and draw near, not to orbit you, but to remember their own center. And that, more than admiration or acclaim, is the quiet miracle you were made to host. Chosen one, kindness without a backbone becomes flattery, and backbone without kindness becomes a barricade. What makes your magnetism unmistakable is the marriage of both, warmth that does not wobble, firmness that does not freeze. In your presence, people sense at once that compassion can live with clarity under the same roof, that tenderness can keep a key to a door that also locks when it must. This is not a trick of manners. It is the fruit of a deeper allegiance. You have pledged yourself to what is good even when it is inconvenient, and because of that vow, your kindness never has to purchase approval at the price of truth. You learned long ago that appeasement is not love, merely a nervous arrangement meant to postpone discomfort. So you chose another way. Your smile does not negotiate away your needs. Your yes is not a disguise for fear. Your generosity is not alone with resentment's interest hidden in small print. You let benevolence travel with boundaries as a chaperone, not to ruin the evening, but to make joy sustainable. You will offer your seat and still keep your soul. You will give the time you can afford and still leave yourself whole enough to be present tomorrow. This is why people relax around you. The body recognizes that your hospitality does not carry a silent invoice, and it learns quickly that your refusals are not punishments, they are protections. For you, for them, for the shape of the relationship itself. Kindness with spine has a sound, and the room learns it. It is the tone that says, I hear you, without promising what I cannot keep. It is the cadence that blesses honesty, even when honesty complicates the hour. It is the music of sorry spoken before pride builds a fortress around a small mistake and turns it into a large one. You apologize like a craftsman repairs a chair, quickly, cleanly, with the right tools in the right sequence. Then you sit again and let the chair be what it was made to be. There is no spectacle in this. There is steadiness. Steadiness is the quiet fragrance that magnetizes more than any speech can. You have understood that kindness is not the absence of conflict, but the refusal to weaponize it. When disagreement arrives, you do not escalate to prove you are strong. You lower the temperature so accuracy can breathe. You separate the person from the problem, as a tailor separates cloth from thread, careful not to cut where a seam can be opened and restitched. You ask for what you need in sentences that honor the other's dignity, and you accept no that is honestly given without turning the moment into a courtroom. Harshness breaks things that did not need breaking. Your spine keeps your gentleness from having to act like a hammer. Kindness with spine knows how to say no without turning the word into a wall. Your no is a doorway that closes softly and stays unlocked for future yeses that fit. You decline invitations scaled to ego rather than purpose, opportunities that glitter but will pawn your peace, conversations that ask you to set down your integrity at the coat check and collect it wrinkled and less yours at the end. You refuse to be the permanent shock absorber for habits others will not steward. And because you refuse this with calm and clarity, you are free to be delightfully available where your presence multiplies goodness. This availability is not desperation. It is a resource earmarked by wisdom. The difference changes the air around you. People are drawn to someone who can be counted on to be kind and counted on to keep himself intact. Your body carries this ethic as fluently as your words. You stand in a way that welcomes and still claims your ground. You sit in a way that rests and still pays attention. Your hands know how to help without taking over, how to touch without turning touch into leverage, how to be still without weaponizing silence. Even your laughter has learned its manners. It does not spend someone else's face for a quick coin of amusement. Joy in your company is never borrowed against another's future. It is paid for in gratitude and shared like bread that refuses to run out. Consider the small scene repeated across your days. A colleague overpromises and arrives anxious. A friend withdraws because shame has rehearsed the worst script in their head. A stranger bristles because a world of small cuts made them bleed early. You meet each with a posture that absorbs the first wave of panic without drowning in it. You do not martyr yourself on the altar of other people's unkept covenants, but you do widen the space where repair can occur. You offer specifics. What can be done now, what can wait, what must be said, without making anyone smaller to make the plan feel bigger. The magnetism here is not theatrical. It is the sensation of being guided by someone who can hold a line and hold a hand at the same time. You have retired the brittle masculinity that confuses dominance with strength. In its place, you practice stewardship, which is stronger because it is accountable. Your voice can be gentle because your values are firm. Your eyes can be soft because your boundaries are clear. Your schedule can be generous because your priorities are decided before the inbox knocks. People gather near such coherence, like travelers near a well that does not run dry at noon. The feminine heart, especially, reads this signal without error. It knows the cost of being asked to soothe a man who confuses need with entitlement, and it knows the relief of meeting a man whose need is simply to be true. In your care, compassion never turns into control. You do not fix to feel valuable. You accompany to make goodness possible. You let others keep their agency, even when your speed could solve a problem faster. You celebrate capacity you did not create, and you refuse to be thanked for boundaries someone else learned to hold. This is a different kind of power, the power that multiplies instead of centralizes, the power that builds constellations instead of spotlights. The chosen ones recognize it. They do not crowd you, they stand alongside, each carrying their own flame, and the room sees clearly by the combined glow. Kindness with spine is also how you treat yourself. You speak to your failures with the firmness you would offer a friend who can do better. and the tenderness you would offer a child who is learning. You rest without apology because fatigue makes cruelty cheap. You eat and move and pray as if tomorrow's you deserves to receive the best of today's choices. When people witness this inner citizenship, their bodies receive a memo they did not know they were waiting for. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is the beginning of honest service. Service born from self-neglect is counterfeit generosity. Service born from self-respect lasts long enough to heal. Finally, kindness with spine proves itself in leaving as much as in staying. You know how to end conversations, commitments, and seasons without salting the ground. You bless what was true, you name what cannot continue, you protect what should not be shared, and you walk forward without dragging a parade of verdicts behind you. This clean exit is part of your magnetism. People trust those who can love well and leave well, because the trust is not attached to possession, it is attached to principle. And principle, lived with gentleness, pulls more surely than any charm unanchored to truth. Chosen one, listening in your care is not a pause between speeches, it is illumination. You do not lean in to collect material. You incline to help a life see itself. When you listen, a map appears that was not visible a moment before, because the light you bring is permission, not interrogation. This light is warm enough to be safe and cool enough to be clear. It shows corners without accusing them of being corners. It shows doors without shaming anyone for not having noticed them yet. People feel it before they understand it. They find themselves speaking in truer sentences than they intended. And the room changes color, the way water changes when clouds move and the sun arrives. The work begins in your own interior. You quiet the chorus that ranks your worth by your cleverness, because that chorus turns conversation into a stage and compels you to perform rather than to witness. You lay down the need to be impressive, like a heavy coat in a warm house. You teach your curiosity to kneel before it runs, to ask what is here before deciding what should be here. With the noise softened, your attention becomes spacious. Spaciousness is the first kindness a listener can offer. In that space, words that usually rush begin to stroll, and truths that usually hide begin to take their time choosing how to be named. Listening as light lives in your eyes as much as your ears. Your gaze does not inventory, it accompanies. It says, I am not here to grade your sentences or to buy a story from you. It says you are not material, you are a person. This gaze drains drama of its need to be dramatic. It invites banter to become honesty without punishing it for being banter first. It lets sorrow be clumsy. It lets joy be louder than the room has been taught to tolerate. Your face does the humble work of being a lantern rather than a spotlight, directed, helpful, unwilling to blind. You have learned the grammar of silence. Your quiet does not abandon, it attends. You hold the pause where another might panic, and in that held moment, the next word a person truly meant to say finds them. You do not rush to complete their sentences to display understanding, because completion can be theft when timing is wrong. You let the voice arrive at its own shoreline and discover that it can walk onto the sand without drowning. Often the most healing thing you ever say is said after that arrival. I'm with you. Anything added to that, offered in the right time, feels like light following warmth. Listening as light asks simple, honest questions that do not cross-examine. What mattered most to you about that? Where in your body did you feel that yes or no? What would make this easier to try? These questions do not pry open doors. They sweep the stoops so the doors can open on their own. They are small chores of friendship and leadership. They convert vague overwhelm into chosen steps, and chosen steps carry a voltage that scattered effort never does. Women who answer such questions near you will feel the relief of not being managed. They will feel the rare experience of being accompanied at the speed of dignity. You practice remembering at a level that proves attention is love. The book mentioned in passing reappears in a follow-up message with the page that held the sentence they needed. The date that cost them courage receives a blessing on the morning it arrives. The taste they cherish shows up at a table you set without fanfare. None of this is grand gesture. It is the day's small choreography becoming humane. Memory is a kind of light because it reveals that someone was seen the first time and did not need to make a spectacle to be worthy of a second look. Magnetism multiplies in such light. Not because people feel captured, but because they feel carried. Listening as light draws lines when needed, because clarity also protects. You will not let someone use your attention to practice cruelty on third parties, nor will you allow self-contempt to monopolize the floor. You guide stories back to accountability with the gentlest of reins. Let's talk about what you can choose now. Let's name the part that's yours and the part that isn't. The correction lands because the light that bears it is unmistakably on their side. Light that is for you can tell you the truth about you without making you smaller. Your presence teaches this paradox by how naturally you live it. You listen with the whole room in mind. In a circle where voices are uneven, you notice who has not yet found a lane, and you widen the road. You do not put people on the spot. You clear a spot and wait. You paraphrase in ways that stitch instead of separate. What I'm hearing from both sides is a devotion to the same outcome and a fear about different risks. Paraphrase, done reverently, is light's carpentry. It builds bridges out of mismatched planks. It lets groups cross from reaction to coherence without anyone falling through. Stories that arrive to you often bring their shadows. You do not interrogate the shadow out of them. You let the shadow exist long enough to lose its appetite for theater. Shame, especially, hates light that refuses to be cruel. You will see shame try to exit by disguising itself as sarcasm or certainty. You will not chase it with a net. You will open a window and let air do its old miracle. The miracle is not instant. It is steady. Eventually, a confession is not a collapse, but an alignment. The room feels it and leans forward because truth is oxygen, and oxygen is what your listening supplies. Because listening is light, it also knows when to turn off, so sleep can do its work. You end conversations when the voice in front of you has become tired enough to turn wise words into weapons against itself. You bless the limit. You say enough for tonight, and you mean it. You trust tomorrow to meet you both with better hands. This restraint keeps your magnetism from becoming a drug. It keeps your companionship from becoming a dependency. It teaches that presence is not an endless resource, it is a renewable one, and renewal requires evening. In intimate rooms, your listening transforms desire into devotion. You let admiration speak, then you let it listen back. You do not fill every quiet with insistence. You let chemistry keep its dignity by giving it time to read the other's face without pressure. You ask consent for every level of closeness, aloud and with your posture, and you treat yes as holy, not as license. In that reverence, attraction becomes unbelievably spacious. The body exhales because it has learned that your want travels in the same carriage as your care. Light can be sensual without being predatory, protective without being parental, unafraid without being unkind. Listening as light begins with humility and ends with courage. You humble yourself by letting other lives be as complicated as your own, and by believing that their complexity deserves patience. You become courageous by naming what must be named in a tone that can be trusted. Over time, a legend forms, not of your brilliance, but of your reliability. People will say in corners and kitchens that they left your company knowing what to do next, or knowing how to wait, or knowing that they were not ridiculous for wanting what they want. That kind of knowing is light you cannot buy. Walk on, chosen one, carrying this lamp that weighs almost nothing and changes almost everything. Keep polishing it with quiet mornings and honest friends. Keep pointing it at the places where fear blurs edges and where hope needs a path. Keep refusing to turn it into a spotlight that blinds, and keep refusing to hide it under politeness that paralyzes. In your hands, listening becomes the most magnetic act of all, because it returns people to the warmth and clarity of their own souls. And when they come back to themselves, they cannot help but draw nearer to you. Not to orbit you, but to travel with you, as chosen ones do, toward what is true. Chosen one, motion without meaning is just noise the floorboards have to forgive. The magnetism you carry does not come from how fast you move, nor from how many eyes follow your steps. It comes from the way your feet keep a covenant with purpose. Before a door opens, you choose what your presence will serve. You decide that your passage through a hallway will reduce confusion, that your seat at a table will raise the value of honesty, that your hand on a task will protect dignity as surely as it produces results. This vow is quiet, but rooms can hear it. They reorganize around a man whose movement is shaped by devotion rather than by appetite for attention. You have learned that the shortest path is not always the most human, so you walk routes that save people, not just minutes. You pace a conversation to protect someone's courage rather than your schedule's convenience. You take one extra step to return the cart, to send the summary, to stack the chairs, to thank the one who made the thing possible. These small, unglamorous distances are how you craft gravity. Momentum gathers where friction is removed, and friction is removed by those who care more about flow than credit. Others feel stronger near you, not because you carry them, but because you clear the way their strength prefers.